The Ranch Standoff, a tale of defiance and barbecue. 5 years ago, I realized a lifelong dream. I bought a 60-acre ranch in the heart of Texas, a stretch of rolling hills dotted with rocky outcrops and shaded by clusters of oak and cedar. A spring-fed pond glimmered under the wide, open sky, and an old but sturdy farmhouse anchored the property. It wasn't a glossy spread from a real estate magazine, but it was Minaya's sanctuary of solitude, far from the clamor of city life. My nearest neighbor was over half a mile away, and that suited me just fine. At 55, I'd spent enough years wrangling deadlines and cybersecurity to crave the quiet. By day, I coded with the windows open, letting the breeze carry the scent of grass and freedom. By evening, I tended to my horses, a handful of rescue dogs, and the chores that kept my little world turning. Life was good, simple, honest, and mine. Then the bulldozers arrived. Not on my land, thank heavens, but on the vast acreage to the east, just beyond a thick line of trees and a shallow creek that marked my property's edge. A developer had swooped in, transforming the raw land into a master-planned community called Serenity Meadows. Rows of beige houses with identical mailboxes sprang up, each lawn manicured to perfection. I wasn't thrilled about the new neighbors, but the distance and natural barriers gave me confidence. A little extra traffic on the county road? I could live with that. Live and let live, I thought. I was wrong. Serenity Meadows came with an HOA homeowners association led by a man named Harold Vance. Harold, a retired bank manager with a penchant for bureaucracy, seemed to believe his authority extended beyond his cookie-cutter cul-de-sacs. He had a vision of order, and somehow my rugged ranch didn't fit into it. The first hint of trouble was subtle, a glossy pamphlet stuffed in my mailbox at the end of my long driveway. It welcomed me to Serenity Meadows, complete with a rulebook dictating approved paint colors, beige, taupe, or grayish, lawn heights no more than 3 inches, and bans on visible trash cans or overnight parking. I laughed it off, assuming it was meant for one of the new residents. My ranch, after all, predated their development by decades. Surely, they didn't think their rules applied to me. A month later, a certified letter arrived, signed by Harold Vance, president of Serenity Meadows HOA. It cited a violation, unapproved livestock visible from designated community areas. My horses, grazing peacefully in their pasture, were apparently an eyesore. From where, exactly? Their nearest house was nearly a mile away, hidden by trees. The letter demanded I build a privacy screen compliant with HOA standards, white vinyl picket fencing, naturally or relocate my animals. It warned of daily fines for noncompliance. I read it twice, my amusement turning to irritation. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. I drafted a polite but firm response, explaining that my property wasn't part of Serenity Meadows, backed by my deed and plat maps. I sent it certified mail, expecting the matter to end there. But Harold Vance wasn't the type to back down. He was a man with too much time and a chip on his shoulder, and I was about to become his obsession. Over the next few weeks, the situation escalated. Another certified letter arrived, this time from the HOA's legal counsel, a local firm happy to cash Harold's checks. It restated their claim, citing a vague county ordinance about unscreened agricultural operations near residential zones. Attached were grainy photos of my horses, my slightly rusty stock trailer, and even my vegetable garden, labeled an unattractive farming operation. The photos were invasive, likely taken with a telephoto lens or by trespassing. The letter demanded immediate compliance, with escalating fines. It was no longer absurd, it was harassment. I called the county planning office to check the ordinance. The official laughed. That rules for feedlots or industrial farms causing odor or runoff, she said. Your horses and garden on 60 acres? Standard rural use. Tell Mr. Vance to take a hike. She confirmed my land had no ties to Serenity Meadows. Armed with this, I dug deeper into Harold Vance. Online, I found a man who thrived on control-sharing committees, cutting ribbons at community events, and running Serenity Meadows like his personal fiefdom. His HOA website boasted of a community safety committee, which posted tips on reporting suspicious activity and enforcing rules. Alarmingly, it hinted at patrols. I needed more intel. Over coffee with a local construction worker, Tom, who'd helped build Serenity Meadows infrastructure, I got the full picture. Harold's a control freak, Tom said, rolling his eyes. Complained about dusty trucks, early work hours, even the porta potty's appearance. He's raised HOA dues for enhanced security talks about patrol cars and uniforms. My stomach sank. A private police force? This was getting out of hand. I called my cousin, Laura, a lawyer with a knack for dismantling bullies. She listened, snorting at Harold's audacity. Their legal claim is nonsense, she said. The surveillance and harassment are actionable, possibly invasion of privacy or emotional distress. If they're impersonating law enforcement, they're in deep trouble. She advised documenting everything and installing visible security cameras. I set up high-definition cameras along my driveway, pasture, and barn, their red lights a clear warning to any snoopers. Then came an invoice from the HOA, thousands in fines for my horses, trailer, garden, and now my improperly maintained barbed wire fence, which had stood for decades. Attached was a brochure for the Serenity Meadows Community Safety Patrol, SMCSP, featuring Harold and another man in navy blue uniforms, standing beside a white SUV with amber lights and decals. Harold's smug grin made my blood boil. This wasn't just harassment, it was a power trip, and I wasn't going to let it slide. Harold Vance's latest move, the invoice, and the Serenity Meadows Community Safety Patrol brochure pushed me past irritation into a cold, calculated resolve. This wasn't just a nosy neighbor sticking his nose where it didn't belong. It was an organized attempt to intimidate and extort me. The photos of my property, the fabricated fines, and the audacity of a fake police force were no longer petty annoyances. They were a direct threat to the life I'd built. My 60-acre ranch, my sanctuary, was under siege, and I wasn't about to roll over. I needed a plan, one that would hit Harold where it hurt without stepping over the line into his kind of chaos. I started with reconnaissance. My cybersecurity background taught me to think like an attacker, know your enemy, find their weaknesses. Harold's HOA website was a goldmine of self-important fluff, photos of him shaking hands at community picnics, newsletters about upholding property values, and cryptic mentions of the Community Safety Committee's proactive measures. The more I dug, the clearer it became that Harold wasn't just a retiree with too much time, he was a man obsessed with control, projecting his authority onto anyone within his line of sight, including me. I called Tom, my construction contact, again for a follow-up. Over burgers at a local diner, he spilled more details. Harold's got the HOA board wrapped around his finger, he said, wiping ketchup from his chin. Most of them are his old golf buddies, or people too spineless to argue. He pushed through a dues hike last year, sold it as security enhancements. Folks weren't happy, but he's got a knack for making dissenters feel like they're betraying the community. Tom leaned in, lowering his voice. Word is, he's got 2 SUVs now, not just one. Decals, lights, the works. Calls it deterrence. I think he just likes playing sheriff. The idea of Harold cruising around in a fake cop car, lording over his beige kingdom, was equal parts ridiculous and infuriating. But Tom's intel about the second SUV and the uniforms raised red flags. This wasn't just a power trip, it was potentially illegal. I needed to be ready for whatever Harold was planning next, and that meant building a fortress of evidence. Laura, my lawyer cousin, was my next call. I sent her the invoice, the brochure, and my growing collection of camera footage, which had already caught Harold's SUV making slow passes by my driveway, binoculars glinting in the sunlight. Laura was practically gleeful. This guy's handing us a case on a silver platter, she said. The photos, the fines, the surveillance site's harassment, plain and simple. The fake patrol setup? That's skating close to impersonating law enforcement, especially with those lights and uniforms. If they step onto your property without permission, they're done. She advised me to keep documenting every letter, every drive-by, every interaction. And make those cameras obvious, she added. Bullies like Harold hate being watched. I doubled down on my defenses. The cameras were already rolling, but I added signs. Private property, no trespassing, video surveillance in use. I also started keeping a detailed log, timestamping every incident. A few days after the invoice, Harold's SUV appeared again, creeping along the county road. This time, the driver, a wiry guy I didn't recognize from the brochure, parked just off my property line. Harold stepped out, clipboard in hand, staring at my pasture like he was appraising a used car. My cameras caught every second of it. He didn't cross the line, but the message was clear. He was watching, waiting for me to slip up. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. Instead, I started thinking bigger. Harold's fake patrol needed a reality check, something to shatter his delusion of authority. That's when I remembered Jake "Rusty" Malone, an old army buddy who'd traded his fatigues for a leather vest. Rusty was the president of the Lone Star Riders Motorcycle Club, a group of mostly veterans and blue-collar guys who rode Harleys and raised money for charities like veteran support and toy drives. They weren't the outlaw bikers you see in movies, more like a brotherhood of guys who loved freedom, loud engines, and doing good on their terms. I called Rusty, catching him at his auto shop. "Hey man," I said, keeping it light. "You still doing that big charity barbecue every summer?" His gravelly laugh crackled through the phone. "Every July, like clockwork." "Why? You volunteering to grill?" I grinned, picturing Harold's face when he met what was coming. "Better. How'd you like to host it at my ranch this year? 60 acres, plenty of parking, no noise complaints from town. I'll provide the space, you bring the party." There was a pause, then Rusty chuckled. "What's the catch? You're not this generous without a reason." I laid it out. They HOA, Harold's fake cops, the harassment, the looming inspection threat. "They're trying to bully me into submission," I said. "I figure 100 bikes and a crowd of your guys enjoying a barbecue might remind them where their jurisdiction ends." Rusty's laugh was louder this time. "You want us to scare the khakis off some HOA clown? That's a new one. Count us in. It'll be a hell of a party." We set the date for the third Saturday in July, 6 weeks out. The timing was perfect. Harold's latest notice had hinted at escalating enforcement around then. I could feel the pieces falling into place. The Lone Star Riders would be my ace in the hole, a peaceful but undeniable show of force. No violence, no threats, just a lot of leather, chrome, and barbecue to make Harold rethink his life choices. As the weeks passed, Harold didn't let up. His SUV made regular appearances, always just shy of my property line. Once, I caught him snapping photos of my fence from the county road, his partner scribbling notes. Another time, he left a new letter taped to my gate, citing ongoing violations and warning of imminent abatement action. The language was getting bolder, the threats more explicit. I sent everything to Laura, who was building a case that could bury Serenity Meadows in legal fees. But I didn't want to just play defense. I wanted Harold to feel the weight of his own arrogance. A week before the barbecue, I was mending the barbed wire fence near the creek, the same one Harold had called dilapidated. His SUV pulled up, closer than usual, and out he came, decked in his full SMCSB uniform, complete with a shiny badge-like patch. "Mr. Thompson," he barked, stopping just short of my property. "This fence is a violation of community standards. It's a safety hazard and an eyesore." I wiped sweat from my brow and leaned on my post. "Harold, this fence has been here longer than your neighborhood. It's on my land, and it's fine. You're on county property. We've got nothing to talk about." He puffed up, clutching his clipboard like a lifeline. "We've had complaints. Bylaw 7, Section 4, Paragraph B requires..." I cut him off. "Show me where that bylaw is filed with the county as applying to my deed." "Go on. I'll wait." His face reddened, but he pressed on, ranting about community impact and property values. I let him ramble, then said, "You're harassing me, Harold. This ends now, or you'll be explaining your fake badge to a real cop." He stormed off, muttering about escalation, but I could see the cracks forming. He was getting desperate, and desperate men make mistakes. The day before the barbecue, a laminated notice appeared zip-tied to my gate, titled Final Notice of Abatement Action. It declared that the SMCSB would enter my property on July 23rd at 1 p.m. to document violations and undertake abatement measures if I didn't comply. It cited the same bogus ordinance and listed my horses, trailer, garden, and fence as offenses. In bold red letters, access will be required. Obstruction will result in escalated enforcement. I snapped a photo and sent it to Laura. "They're walking into a trap," she said, barely containing her excitement. "They've just admitted to planning an illegal trespass in writing." I called the county sheriff's non-emergency line that morning, calmly explaining the situation. I was hosting a charity event, and my HOA neighbors, with their unofficial patrol, had threatened to trespass. The dispatcher logged it and promised to notify the deputies. Everything was set. Harold was about to learn that his little empire of clipboard authority had no power on my land. The morning of July 23rd broke with the kind of Texas summer clarity that makes you believe the world is bigger than your troubles. The sky was a deep, endless blue, and the air carried the promise of heat, tempered by a gentle breeze. My ranch, all 60 acres of it, felt like a fortress, not of walls or weapons, but of resolve. Today was the day Harold Vance and his Serenity Meadows Community Safety Patrol would make their move, and I was ready. The Lone Star Riders Motorcycle Club was coming, and with them, a tidal wave of barbecue, chrome, and quiet defiance that would make Harold's clipboard tremble. I'd spent the past week preparing. The flat field near the pond was cleared for parking, with space for over 100 bikes. I'd set up tables for food and grills, ensuring easy access from the county road. My security cameras were rolling, their red lights blinking like sentinels. I'd even mowed a wide swath around the farmhouse, not for Harold's aesthetic standards, but to give the riders a clear view of any approaching vehicles. Every detail was deliberate, a chess move in a game Harold didn't even know he was playing. By 10 a.m., the first rumbles of engines echoed down the county road. The Lone Star Riders arrived in waves, their Harleys gleaming in the sunlight. Rusty Malone, their president, led the pack, his grizzled beard and leather vest a stark contrast to the beige conformity of Serenity Meadows. These weren't the leather-clad villains of Hollywood stereotypes. The riders were veterans, mechanics, small business owners, folks who worked hard, loved their bikes, and gave back through charity. Families came too, with wives setting up picnic blankets and kids chasing each other near the pond. By noon, the field was a sea of chrome, with over 120 motorcycles parked in neat rows and close to 200 people mingling, laughing, and digging into coolers of soda and beer. The smell of charcoal and sizzling brisket filled the air as the designated grill masters, burly guys with tattoos and aprons, tended to ribs, chicken, and burgers. Portable speakers played classic rock, low enough to keep the peace but loud enough to set the mood. It was a community, real and unpretentious, the kind Harold's manicured neighborhood could only dream of. Rusty found me near the farmhouse, handing me a cold water bottle. "Hell of a setup, Dan," he said, his grin wide. "This beats the dusty park we usually get. You sure you're ready for your HOA pal to crash the party?" I scanned the crowd, leather vests, denim, and the glint of chrome under the shade trees. "Let's just say Harold's in for a surprise," I replied. "He thinks he's bringing the law. He's about to meet a different kind of authority." Rusty chuckled, clapping me on the shoulder. "No trouble from us, man. We'll eat, drink, and let him dig his own grave." As the clock ticked toward 1 p.m., the air grew charged with anticipation. Rusty had posted a few riders near the county road as lookouts, not to intimidate but to signal any sign of Harold's fake patrol. At 12:45, a female lanky guy with a bandana gave a subtle nod to Rusty. "Showtime's coming," Rusty murmured, strolling back to the main crowd. He didn't make a big announcement, but a ripple of awareness spread through the riders. Conversations continued, but postures shifted slightly, eyes glancing toward the driveway. It wasn't tension, exactly, more like a collective readiness, calm but unyielding. I took my position on the porch, phone in hand, camera ready. My heart was pounding, not out of fear but from the thrill of knowing Harold was about to walk into a trap of his own making. Right on cue, at 1 p.m., the white Ford Explorer with its Serenity Meadows Community Safety Patrol decals and amber light bar appeared at the end of my driveway. It paused, the occupants likely stunned by the sheer number of bikes and people. Then, slowly, it crept forward, the amber lights flashing feebly in the bright sunlight. The crowd's chatter quieted, heads turning to watch. The Explorer stopped about 50 yards from the farmhouse, blocked by a line of parked Harleys. Harold Vance stepped out of the passenger's side, adjusting his ridiculous build cap, his navy blue uniform crisp and self-important. His partner, a younger guy I recognized from the brochure, followed, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Harold clutched his clipboard like a shield, his eyes darting over the sea of leather and chrome. He looked smaller than I'd expected, diminished by the scale of the gathering. Several riders, big, bearded guys with easy confidence, casually moved closer, not threatening but present. Harold cleared his throat, trying to project authority. "Mr. Thompson," he called, his voice wavering slightly over the low hum of music and idling engines. I stepped off the porch, closing the distance to about 10 feet, with Rusty and a few senior riders flanking me silently. "Harold," I said, my voice steady, "you're trespassing. Your notice is invalid. This is private property, and we're holding a private event. You need to leave." Harold's eyes flicked to Rusty, then to the crowd. He rallied, puffing out his chest. "We are the Serenity Meadows Community Safety Patrol," he announced, holding up his clipboard. "We issued a formal notice of abatement. We're here to inspect documented violations affecting our community." A ripple of laughter spread through the riders. A burly guy with a braided beard called out, "Community? Pal, your community's a mile that way. This is a private party." Harold ignored him, focusing on me. "Mr. Thompson, you are required to grant access to inspect the fence, pasture, and outbuildings. Failure to comply is obstruction." His partner shifted nervously, eyes darting to the crowd. I stepped closer, my voice hard but calm. "Harold, let me be clear. You're not law enforcement. That uniform's a costume. Your car's a joke. Your bylaws don't apply here. You're trespassing and harassing my guests. Get back in your ridiculous SUV and leave, or we'll have a problem." The younger guy looked like he might bolt. Harold's face reddened, his clipboard trembling. "This is lawful notification," he insisted, waving it like a talisman. "We represent the HOA and have a fiduciary duty," Rusty cut in, his voice low but carrying weight. "Friend, you heard Dan. This is a charity event for veterans. You're interrupting our barbecue. Unless you've got a warrant from a real judge, I suggest you and your buddy take a hike before you ruin the ribs." Harold's bravado faltered. He looked from me to Rusty, then to the crowd, hundreds of eyes watching, unimpressed. His fantasy of authority was crumbling, and he knew it. "The violations," he started, but I cut him off. "There are no violations, Harold. There's only you, trespassing and risking charges for impersonating an officer. I'm going to count to 10. If you're not gone by then, I'm calling the sheriff. I already logged your threat this morning, and I've got plenty of witnesses." I held up my phone and started counting. 1, 2. Harold's partner grabbed his arm. "Harold, let's go. This isn't worth it." Harold's eyes widened, his delusion cracking under the weight of reality. 3, 4. He yanked his arm free, muttering, "This isn't over," but there was no conviction in it. He scrambled back into the Explorer, his partner diving into the driver's seat. 5, 6. The SUV lurched into a clumsy turn, tires spitting gravel, narrowly missing a row of bikes. 7. It sped down the driveway, dust trailing behind, the amber lights still flashing uselessly. 8. A cheer erupted from the riders, followed by laughter. Rusty shook his head, grinning. "Well, that was quick. Didn't even get to offer him a burger." The tension dissolved, music swelling as the barbecue reclaimed the day. Harold's pathetic attempt at a raid had lasted less than 5 minutes, undone by the sheer presence of the Lone Star Riders and my refusal to bend. It was a victory, but I knew the war wasn't over. Harold had been humiliated, but men like him don't slink away quietly. The dust from Harold Vance's fleeing Ford Explorer hadn't even settled before the Lone Star Riders Motorcycle Club turned the barbecue back into a celebration. Laughter rolled across my 60-acre ranch, mingling with the smoky aroma of brisket and the twang of classic rock from the speakers. The confrontation with Harold and his Serenity Meadows Community Safety Patrol had been a brief, almost comical interruption, like a mosquito swatted away before it could bite. But as I stood on my porch, watching kids play near the pond and riders swapping stories over cold beers, I knew this wasn't the end. Harold's retreat was a tactical withdrawal, not a surrender. Men like him don't learn easily, but I was ready for whatever came next. Around 3 p.m., as the barbecue hit its peak, a new vehicle rolled up my driveway, a county sheriff's cruiser, its presence as real as Harold's was fake. The deputy, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s with a calm, seen-it-all demeanor, parked behind the rows of Harleys and stepped out. Rusty and I walked over to meet her, the crowd parting respectfully. "Afternoon, folks," she said, her eyes scanning the orderly gathering. "Dispatch got a call this morning about a potential issue, something about an HOA dispute and possible trespassing. Care to fill me in?" I laid it out, sticking to the facts. I'd called the sheriff's non-emergency line to report that Serenity Meadows' unofficial patrol, led by Harold Vance, had threatened to enter my property to enforce rules that didn't apply. I described their arrival in a marked SUV with flashing lights, Harold's demand for access in his faux cop uniform, and my refusal, backed by the presence of 200 guests. "They left when I started counting to 10 and threatened to call you," I said, showing her the laminated notice Harold had zip-tied to my gate, along with photos from their brochure featuring the SUV and uniforms. Rusty chimed in, his tone easy but firm. "It's a charity event for veterans, ma'am. We're just here for the barbecue." This guy showed up acting like he's the law, waving a clipboard. We didn't do anything but stand here. A few nearby riders nodded, confirming the story. The deputy jotted notes, her expression sharpening when I mentioned the uniforms and amber light bar. "So, they're using emergency lighting and claiming authority off their property?" she asked, eyebrow raised. I nodded, handing over my phone with the footage from my security cameras. She studied the images, her face unreadable but serious. Impersonating an officer, or even creating that appearance to intimidate, is a problem, she said. We've had minor complaints about Mr. Vance before, but this is new territory. I'll need your contact info and copies of this evidence. I gave her everything, including Harold's name and the HOA's details. She thanked us, gave a nod to the crowd, and added, "Nice event. Keep it safe and reasonable." With that, she drove off, leaving me with a sense that Harold's world was about to get a lot smaller. The barbecue wrapped up by dusk, a roaring success. The riders raised thousands for their veterans fund, and my ranch was left spotless, save for some flattened grass where the bikes had parked. Rusty pulled me aside before they left, his grin wide. "Hell of a day, Dan. If your HOA buddy tries anything else, give me a call. We'll bring the ribs." I laughed, shaking his hand. The rider's presence had been my trump card: peaceful, legal, and devastatingly effective. As the last Harleys rumbled down the county road, my ranch felt like mine again, but I knew the real fallout was just beginning. 2 days later, Laura called, her voice brimming with excitement. "You won't believe this," she said. "The deputy filed a report, and it's making waves. The county attorney's office is looking into Harold's patrol. Those uniforms and the SUV's lights are too close to the county constable's design for comfort. They're talking misdemeanor charges, maybe even a felony if they push the impersonation angle." She paused, savoring the next part. "And it gets better. The deputy visited Harold. He didn't take it well, tried to argue he was serving the community. When they pressed him on the trespass and fake authority, he got belligerent. Not a good look. The real chaos, though, was brewing inside Serenity Meadows. Word of Harold's failed raids spread like wildfire. Someone, maybe his nervous partner, had talked, or perhaps residents had seen the SMCSB Explorer speeding back to the neighborhood, tail between its legs. The HOA's online message boards exploded. Residents weren't angry at me. They were furious with Harold. They'd been paying higher dues for his enhanced security, only to learn he was playing cop, picking fights with non-members, and risking legal trouble for the whole community. An emergency HOA meeting was called, and according to Tom, it was a bloodbath. Harold got roasted. Tom told me over coffee a week later. People wanted answers. Where's the money for this patrol going? Why is he threatening a rancher who's not even in the HOA? He tried to spin it, called you a scofflaw and the riders thugs, but nobody bought it. His board cronies bailed, and the lawyer told them to shut down the patrol ASAP or face lawsuits. Harold was stripped of his community safety title, and his presidency hung by a thread. The Explorer's decals and lights were gone within days, and the uniforms were recalled. Serenity Meadows was unraveling, and Harold was at the center of the collapse. Laura saw the opening and struck. She drafted a legal letter to the HOA's council, laying out their crimes: harassment, illegal surveillance, attempted trespass, and potential impersonation of law enforcement. It demanded a formal apology, cancellation of all fines, a guarantee of no further contact, and reimbursement for my camera costs and her fees. The alternative was a lawsuit for harassment, invasion of privacy, and emotional distress, with the county's investigation as leverage. The HOA, now leaderless after Harold resigned for health reasons, caved immediately. I received a stiffly worded apology from the interim president, confirmation that all fines were void, a check for my expenses, and a promise to leave me alone. Peace returned to my ranch. The horses grazed without binoculars tracking them. My trailer sat unmolested, and my garden thrived. Harold's empire of petty tyranny had crumbled, hoisted by his own petard. The victory was sweet, not just because the harassment stopped, but because it had been so public, so complete. The Lone Star Riders barbecue had been the perfect catalyst: legal, peaceful, and a stark reminder that real community doesn't need fake badges to thrive. But the story wasn't over. The ripples of that day kept spreading, reshaping Serenity Meadows and my own perspective on standing up to bullies. Harold's downfall was a lesson in hubris, but it also raised questions about power, entitlement, and how far people will go to enforce their version of order. I couldn't help but wonder how many others were fighting their own Harold Van Cess, trapped in battles with petty tyrants who thought rules trumped rights. With Harold Vance's retreat and the collapse of his Serenity Meadows Community Safety Patrol, my 60-acre ranch returned to the quiet I'd fought so hard to preserve. The Texas sun rose and set over my hills, undisturbed by the hum of a fake cop car or the rustle of another certified letter. My horses grazed in peace, their tails swishing lazily in the pasture. The rusty stock trailer sat by the barn, a silent sentinel of my victory. My vegetable garden, once deemed an unattractive farming operation, burst with tomatoes and peppers, thriving in defiance of Harold's rulebook. Life was as it should be, simple, free, and mine. But the echoes of that July 23rd barbecue lingered, reshaping not just my world but the beige empire of Serenity Meadows, and leaving me with lessons I'd carry for years. The immediate aftermath was almost surreal in its swiftness. The HOA's surrender was total. Me lawyer cousin Laura's letter had hit like a sledgehammer. The check covering my security camera costs and her fees arrived within a week, tucked into a packet with a formal apology from the interim board president, a meek accountant named Susan who'd been thrust into the role after Harold's resignation. The letter was dry, almost robotic, promising no further contact or enforcement attempts. All fines were voided, erased as if they'd never existed. The Serenity Meadows Community Safety Patrol was gone, its explorers stripped of decals and lights, relegated to ferrying HOA board members to meetings instead of playing at law enforcement. Harold himself had vanished from the community spotlight, no longer strutting at ribbon cuttings or chairing committees. According to Tom, my construction contact, he'd become a ghost in his own neighborhood, his lawn still perfect but his presence invisible. The county attorney's investigation wrapped up shortly after. Laura got the details through her legal contacts. While there was enough evidence for misdemeanor charges, possibly even a felony for impersonating an officer, the authorities opted for a formal warning to the HOA and Harold personally. The decision hinged on the patrol's swift dismantling, Harold's fall from power, and the lack of physical harm during the attempted raid. They figured the public humiliation was punishment enough, Laura told me, chuckling. Plus, you and those bikers solved the problem before it escalated further. Clean and efficient. I agreed. Dragging it out in court might have been satisfying, but this resolution was faster, cheaper, and just as final. Inside Serenity Meadows, the fallout was seismic. Tom kept me updated over beers at the local dive bar. The emergency HOA meeting had been a turning point. Residents, fed up with Harold's antics, demanded transparency. They wanted to know how their dues had funded his cosplay crusade, why he'd targeted a non-member, and how much legal risk he'd exposed them to. The board, desperate to avoid lawsuits, ousted Harold's cronies in the next election, replacing them with residents who prioritized community over control. Dues were cut slightly, the budget for security enhancements slashed, and the focus shifted to actual improvements: playgrounds, community gardens, holiday events. Serenity Meadows was starting to act like a neighborhood, not a fiefdom. Harold's reputation didn't recover. Tom heard he still lived in Serenity Meadows, but he kept to himself, his days of petty tyranny over. "Guy's a pariah now," Tom said, shaking his head. He thought he was king, but he played himself right out of the game. I couldn't help but picture Harold peering through his blinds, catching glimpses of my ranch through the trees, maybe remembering the gleam of 100 Harleys and the laughter that followed his retreat. Did he regret it? Did he learn anything? Men like Harold rarely embrace humility, but the fear of another misstep would keep him in check. That was enough. My bond with the Lone Star Riders grew stronger. Rusty and his crew declared the barbecue one of their best ever, not just for the open space and lack of town restrictions, but for the unexpected entertainment. "You gave us a story for the ages," Rusty said when he called to thank me. "Next year, same time, same place." I laughed. "Long as you bring the brisket." The event became a tradition, a yearly rumble of engines filling my ranch for a day of charity and camaraderie. It wasn't just about the veterans' fun, though they raised thousands. It was about community, the kind built on mutual respect, not enforced conformity. Looking back, the whole saga feels like a fever dream. How does a retired bank manager convince himself he can police a ranch that's not even part of his HOA? How does he think a clipboard and a fake badge give him power over private property? Harold's delusion was staggering, a case study in what happens when small authority goes unchecked. He wasn't just a nuisance. He embodied a peculiar kind of entitlement, the belief that his vision of order, beige, manicured, and rigidly controlled, should govern everyone in his orbit, regardless of laws or boundaries. His downfall wasn't just my victory. It was a reminder that power, no matter how petty, can corrupt when it's wielded without accountability. The barbecue was the perfect weapon: legal, peaceful, and devastating. The Lone Star Riders didn't need to throw a punch or raise their voices. Their presence, combined with my refusal to bend, exposed Harold's authority as the hollow sham it was. It was a masterclass in passive resistance, backed by the unspoken weight of 100 leather-clad veterans. But it also raised deeper questions, ones I still wrestle with at 55, sitting on my porch with a coffee, watching the sunset paint my hills gold. How do we handle those who abuse power, however small? What's the line between standing your ground and escalating a fight? And how do you balance peace with the need to push back against injustice? For me, the answer lay in preparation and principle. Documenting every letter, photo, and drive-by built an airtight case. Consulting Laura ensured I stayed within the law. And calling in the writers? That was the spark of creativity that turned a dispute into a rout. I didn't just want Harold to stop. I wanted him to see the absurdity of his actions, to feel the weight of a community that didn't need his rules to thrive. The sheriff's visit, the HOA's collapse, the public humiliation, it all flowed from that moment when Harold's explorer fled, amber lights flashing uselessly. My ranch remains my sanctuary. The cameras stay up, not out of paranoia, but as a reminder. Good fences and good footage make good neighbors. The riders return every July, their engines a welcome roar, a celebration of freedom and defiance. Serenity Meadows has settled into a quieter existence, its new board focused on potlucks instead of patrols. And Harold? If he's out there, trimming his lawn to exactly 3 inches, I hope he's learned to respect boundaries. My guess is he hasn't, but he knows better than to test mine again. To anyone reading this, I hope my story resonates. Maybe you've faced your own Harold Van Saya neighbor, a boss, an HOA board drunk on their own rules. Maybe you felt the sting of petty injustice or the pressure to conform. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you dealt with a bully wielding fake authority? How did you stand your ground? And what do you think about the balance between peace and resistance? When is it right to fight back? And when do you let it go? Share your stories, your perspectives, and let's start a conversation about standing up to bullies without losing who we are. After all, sometimes the best way to win is with a barbecue, a few friends, and a whole lot of chrome.